In the heart of Marshall, Minnesota, lives an inspiration who just so happens to be a 7th grade teacher at the Marshall Middle School.
My name is Peter Thor. My original name that was given to me is Peter Thor.
Many teachers can call themselves previous Marshall students, including Mr. Thor. However, his story begins a little different. Peter Thor was born in the mountains of Laos and lived with his family for 4 years in villages as hunters, farmers, and gatherers.
I remember just being in the forest, not having running water, having a house that was made out of bamboo, dirt floor, open fire. My dad would be gone for 2-3 days at a time for hunting and gathering. My mom would just always be in the fields working. One of my first memories is when I was probably 2.5 years old. My dad had just started on his trip, his route for trading, and I was home with my mom, and my little brother got sick. He just had a really high temp, and we tried like medicines that we had, just herbal medicines that were around, and nothing worked. And so his fever spiked, and in the middle of the night he passed away. And I remember that just because it was traumatic. I remember seeing my mom crying, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to help, not knowing how long my dad would be gone. And I just knew it was a hard time for my mom. And I remember her just yelling and screaming and crying and praying, and then eventually having to bury my brother.
From the conflicts within the Vietnam War, they had to flee to refugee camps for safety. For 3.5 weeks, his family had to walk 150 miles through the jungle. During his trip, he encountered many dangers, including crossing the Mekong River to get to Thailand.
We had to pay somebody to get us across this river, the Mekong River. And this river is one of the major rivers in Southeast Asia. And it's wide, and it's fast flowing. And I was just afraid of water because I was 4 years old. And we had to cross in the middle of the night. And I knew we were being followed by soldiers, and I could hear gunshots, and I could hear different things that just scared me. So when I got in the boat with my mom and my dad, and this guide that was gonna get us across, my job was to take a plastic bottle and keep taking water out of the little canoe and throwing back over. And the whole time, I'm just tense, and I'm just shaking the whole time, because I was so scared. I'm a 4-year-old kid, not knowing what's gonna happen, afraid of the water. And so I tell my kids all the time, the reason why I can't swim is probably because of that experience.
Once the Thors arrived at the refugee camp, their freedom was limited.
It just felt like we were in jail the whole time. We got rations for food, but it was never enough. So I actually remember at night, as kids, we would sneak underneath those barbed wires and go and get fruit for just additional food, and stuff like that. So some fun times, but hard times too. My sister was born in the refugee camp, and the clothes that I'm wearing there are donations from some sponsors I had through a program. So monthly I would get a little box with little treats and little toys and sometimes clothes in there. So
at age 6, with the help of his sponsors, Mr. Thor and his family made the trip from the refugee camp to St. Paul, Minnesota. There, Mr. Thor began his education. He had a slow start repeating 1st grade. Eventually, through the persistence of his teachers, he caught up and even skipped 6th grade. But just as he was getting used to the new environment, his dad took a job in Marshall, and the Thors moved once again.
I remember not wanting to move again because we had been in St. Paul for 6 years. And I had a lot of friends there. Coming to Marshall, there was just not a lot of minorities yet at that time. So when I came to Marshall, I was pretty bitter. I didn't really want to be here. So for the first year or two, I kind of struggled to just kind of fit in.
While he eventually made friends, he still stuck out. When he asked out his friend Danielle, he was turned down because of his differences.
You know, like sometimes things that are different from you scare you, and I think that was kind of the initial reaction, and I said, I was very quiet in high school, and I just shook my head no to him.
Eventually, though, things did get better for Mr. Thor.
So when I came to Marshall, I struggled too, but then I just had amazing teachers. But Mr. Bigger pulled me to the side in the hall one day and just said, hey, you know what? I really respect how hard you work at everything you do. And I think you're going to do really well whatever you choose to do. And I remember Mrs. Marshall saying, hey, you're awesome at math. You'd be a really good math teacher.
After graduation, Mr. Thor went to college at SMSU, taught in St. Paul for 2 years, then came back to teach in Marshall. With more success this time, he asked out Danielle once more and eventually married her. They now have 4 kids together: Samuel, Micah, Josiah, and Anna. Now that his homeland is safe to go back to, Mr. Thor's parents travel there every other year. Someday, he hopes to visit too and show his wife and children where he grew up. At age 4, Micah has been saving money to hopefully visit Laos with his dad. While his family and culture's traditions have been integrated into his home through food, clothes, and simple Laotian phrases, Mr. Thor likes to bring his past journey into the classroom as well, but not in the way you'd think.
I would hope that if people saw my story, they would say that I worked hard, that I persevered, and that I cared. Not that I was the brightest or the smartest or the most athletic or the funniest or any of that stuff, but just that I worked super hard.
No matter where Mr. Thor goes, his story continues to inspire everyone around him.
We love